Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 10, a prayer for God to bring justice. I've already noted that Psalm 9 and 10 in both the Septuagint, that's the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, as well as the Vulgate, the Latin translation, have this one psalm as being united. Psalm 9 and 10, it treats it as one single psalm. It contains a partial acrostic. We saw it in Psalm 9, runs to the end of Psalm 9, and then picks up in Psalm 10, although there's a few gaps. It skipped the letter Daleth back in Psalm 9. It's going to skip at least 3, 4, maybe 5, depending on how you count them, letters in this psalm. But the psalm has no superscription, which we would expect if these were originally united as one psalm. With that in mind, let's jump in. Why do you stand afar, O Lord? Notice it begins with a question. You say, Lama Yadunai, the Lama, to what or why, we say why. But notice that Lamed, that's actually picking up our acrostic. So why do you stand afar off, O Lord? And God is being questioned as to why he does not intervene. Why aren't you doing something? Look what's going on, Lord. Why are you doing something? And then he repeats it. Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? So he's really, it's not two different questions. It's really the same question. We move to verse 2. In pride, the wicked hotly pursues the afflicted. And what we're going to do here is see the way of the wicked. So the wicked is described with regard to their pride. Let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. For the wicked boasts of his heart's desire, and the greedy man curses and spurns the Lord. The wicked in the haughtiness of his countenance does not seek him. So all throughout, we're seeing this attitude of the wicked, and the psalmist is saying, look at what they're doing. Why aren't you bringing judgment against those kinds of actions? Notice all his thoughts is there is no God. And so his ways prosper at all times. And you say, well, wait, that should not be. And notice he's prospering. Notice you're speaking to him. Your judgments are on high, out of his sight. So it's speaking to God still about the wicked, though. As for all his adversaries, he snorts at them. He says to himself, and notice what the words of the wicked are. We've seen his ways, but now we see his words. I will not be moved. Throughout all generations, I will not be in adversity. The wicked looks and says, look, there is no God to balance the books. There's no one to make me do justice. And so I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do it my way. And knowing no one is going to stop me. And I will be okay. Verse 7, his mouth, and now we see the words of the wicked, his mouth is full of curses. Now, we had a new acrostic here, the word pat is mouth, and so that's, my verse starts with that. His mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue, notice how you have the connection of the mouth and the tongue. Under his tongue is mischief and wickedness. And so you have his words that are just, well, he's saying bad things. And then we're going to come to verse 8 and see the next in line of the acrostic with regard to his eyes. Verse 8, he sits in the lurking places of the village, in the hiding places, he kills the innocent. And now we see his eyes steadily watch for the unfortunate. So we see the eyes of the wicked, and that's, like I said, that's part of our acrostic. Ion is actually the word for eye, as well as the letter with which it starts. And so we see him. He's sitting, he's killing, he's watching, waiting to pounce upon the unfortunate, upon those who cannot, upon the helpless, those who cannot protect themselves. Verse 9, he lurks in a hiding place. And notice the trapping motif here. Like a lion in his lair, he's waiting to pounce on his prey. That's that lurking idea. He lurks to catch the afflicted. He catches the afflicted when he draws him into his net, sort of setting the trap for him. Verse 10, he crouches, he bows down. He's waiting to entrap, to pounce upon the helpless, and the unfortunate fall by his mighty ones. Verse 11, he says to himself, God has forgotten. And so his reasoning, he says, look, if there is a God, he's overworked and underpaid and really can't be bothered with me. And so that's okay. He won't notice me. So he's really what we would call a practicing atheist. You say, well, no, he believes in God, but he's treating God as if God isn't there or God isn't going to respond. He says to himself, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will never see it. He's like the deist of old, the person that says, well, yes, I believe in a supreme being that went out and started everything and created the universe, but he has sort of let the thing into orbit swing and he has gone off on a long vacation and he doesn't mess with us. He doesn't believe in a God who judges. And so he will never see it. And because he will never see it, as long as I've hidden it, or even if I haven't, even if it's out in the open, I don't care. Now, verses 1 through 11 have the description of the wicked. That's what we've been seeing. But now in verses 12 through 18, the rest of the prayer is David's prayer about the wicked. Lord, what are you going to do about it? And so here's David's call to action, beginning in verse 12. Arise, O Lord. And with that, the Kuma Adonai, that first letter, the Kaf, notice it's going to be the next letter in our acrostic, and so that fits. We've picked back up with the acrostic. Arise, O Lord, and this is the supplication. O God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the afflicted. So he's calling God to arise, lift up, don't forget, do something. This is now the call to action. First half of the psalm, the description. Last half of the psalm, Lord, do something about what we described. Verse 13, why has the wicked spurned God? And notice the attitude of the wicked is being described here. He has said to himself, you will not require it. And we sort of saw this earlier in the earlier verse, but he's saying the same thing. You will not require it. You will not bring about a judgment on this. That's what they're saying, Lord. Did you hear that? Arise and do something about that. Verse 14, you have seen it, for you have beheld mischief. Now, when he says you have seen it, the Hebrew again, ra'ita, and again, that resh, that's the next letter in our acrostic. So we're back on board with our acrostics. You have seen it, you have beheld mischief, and the assurance here is that God has heard. You've beheld mischief and vexation to take it into your hand. The unfortunate commits himself to you. You have been the helper of the orphan. And so notice, God has described the helper. Now, I like that word. He describes the helper because the Hebrew word there, the ozer, the cal participle of azar. And so sort of describing what God is doing. But that's a familiar term because that was actually used. That same word was used way back in Genesis 2, I think it was around verse 18, when the woman was created to be a helper fitted for the man. Now the word fitted isn't there, but this is the same word for the helper. The woman was created to be a helper. God is being described here as the helper of the orphan. Verse 15, break the arm of the wicked and the evildoer. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. So here's what we call an imprecatory prayer, a prayer that says, Lord, there's the evildoer. You promised you were going to judge them. Do it. Do it now. Break his arm. Seek out his wickedness. And the idea is seek it out, not just that you're aware of it, but do something about it. Now, this imprecation, sometimes we say, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to pray? Aren't we supposed to love our enemies and forgive them? And I think in the imprecatory prayer, he says, well, Lord, this is one who refuses you. So let your judgment be upon them. Now, let me just say, I think there's a modern day application for the imprecatory prayer. When you see evil being done, you can say, Lord, get them. And now we can add, Lord, if you want to get them by saving them, by turning their heart and causing them to trust in you, then do that, and I'll rejoice. And be ready to rejoice if your enemy comes to Christ and thereby becomes your friend. You see, we're ready to forgive as God forgives. But then, Lord, and if he doesn't, take him out. Let your judgment be done. Although I think it's important to pray, Lord, and and if I have done wrong, forgive me. Let me be, in other words, do that same sort of imprecation against yourself. Lord, take me out, not to kill me, but to straighten me out, make me yours. If I have strayed, then Lord, bring me back. Conquer my will, conquer my sin, conquer me, if that's what it takes. And so break the arm. And by the way, we have the next letter, the shavor, there in the Hebrew. So that's the next letter. We're almost down to the end of both the passage as well as the Hebrew alphabet. Break the arm, seek out his wickedness, do something about that. And now, verse 16, the Lord is king forever and ever. Notice this statement of not just the eternal existence of God, but that he is king. He rules. His rule is forever and ever. His kingdom is forever and ever. We go on from here. Nations have perished from his land. And now we have this affirmation of faith. O Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will strengthen their heart. And now, when he talks about the desire of the humble, uh, we have the last letter in our acrostic. Notice ta voth is the term there describing that. The desire of the humble. So we finally come to the last letter. We're finishing up both the acrostic and our psalm. O Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. He continues that you have heard. Notice, you will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to vindicate the orphan and the oppressed, so that man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. So notice, God is reaching out. He's reaching out, and the psalmist affirms this, that he's both asked God to do this, but he said he's speaking in faith. What I ask, you will carry out. You've heard the desire of the humble. You'll strengthen their heart. You'll incline your ear to vindicate, notice, the orphan and the oppressed, those who are downtrodden, so that the man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. God will win. That's the point. Now, the point that we're making here is that God hears the helpless. And that's really the basis of our salvation. You see, Romans chapter 5 speaks about how while we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. It's only as we recognize that we were helpless, that we were ungodly, that without Christ we were condemned, that without Christ we were the ones that would suffer the very anger, the very just anger of God. It's only when we recognize that and then turn and repent and trust in Him that we find salvation. Have you done that? Have you done that? Do that today.